So hey, book 9. Book 9. I love this series. And I kept thinking that maybe the author was gonna do something and add another character. And the way she did, I did not see coming. It comes out of left field 6 ways to Sunday. Seriously, 6 ways to Sunday. And hey, welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, K-R-S-T-I-N-A. This is where we books, talk about books, no special effects, no theme music, none of that fancy smancy stuff going on here. And if you could please hit the like and subscribe if you're still here. Please hit the like button. Please thumbs up. I don't get many viewers because I don't make really good thumbnails and I don't have really good hooks and all this kind of stuff. The title of my video is the title of the book because that's what I'm doing in my video. I'm talking about the book in my video. But anyways, so we have Rexford and Sloane or Charlotte, and we have the Weasels, Hawk and Peregrine and Raven, and Kit and Cordelia, husband and wife. And we spend half of the book. This guy gets killed at a scientific meeting. And for the first half of the book, you're getting all this information about the beginnings and origins of the telegraph. And you really get heavily invested in the telegraph and its origins and sending messages over wires and all this kind of stuff. And then the book so it's telegraph, learning all this stuff about telegraph. I did print out a little bit of info. And without my glasses, the electric telegraph was invented in 1837 with William F. Cooke and Charles Wheatstone patenting their system in England that year. In the United States, as we all know and familiar with Morse code, Samuel Morse also developed his version, receiving a patent in 1837 and sending the first official message in 1844. The electrical telegraph consisted of 2 or more geographical separate stations called telegraph offices. The offices were connected by wires, usually supported by overhead utility poles, which we know very well nowadays. Many electrical telegraph systems were invented that operated in different ways, but the ones that became widespread fit into 2 categories. First, of the needle telegraphs, in which electric current sent down the telegraph line produces an electromagnetic force that moves a needle-shaped pointer into a position over a printed list in order to point to a specific item in that list, such as that if the alphabet is early needle telegraph models are multiple needles that require multiple wires to be installed between stations. The first commercial needle telegraph system and the most widely used different type was Cooke and Wheatstone's telegraph, invented in 1837. The second category of armature systems, in which the current activities the telegraph sounder that makes a click. The communication on this type of system relies on sending clicks with the encoded magnet patterns, and that became the Morse code, the dot 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 dot. And so you're spending most of the book learning all about the telegraph system and all this stuff. And it turns out that the French are the sort of bad guys in this one. They are attempting to make the English believe that the French are ahead of this and are going to get ahead, really just release their thing any day now. And it's false. And it takes like half the book to get that clarification that the French were just setting up the British to believe that the French were all ready to release their system any day now, but that was false information. They're still working on it, and it still exists in this time period. But it's not officially ready yet, and it takes like half the book. Talking about Morse code and the electrical wires and the sending of messages and all that kind of stuff. And then more than 50% way through the book, all of a sudden we start talking about the stock exchange and the origins and the beginnings of the stock exchange. So then Cordelia is really, 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 really good at mathematics, Kit's wife. And Raven is also really, really good with mathematics too. So Cordelia and Raven gain employment in different ways with the stock exchange. And they work closely with this guy, and they learn about the stock exchange. They really, really get deeply involved in it and the workings of it. When the stock exchange building on Capel Court was completed in 1802, a more formal government structure was also created. Management, regulation, and direction of all concerns was given to a committee of members chosen by ballot annually. The building itself was run by 9 trustees and managers who were separated from the management committee. The daily hours of operation were set at 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Now, as to the physical layout of the building, I shall describe it in detail because it's important for both of you to know your way around once we begin our work in earnest. And he talks about that. And then still the building. So he also talks about, they talk about different kinds of stocks, and they talk about what the war could be doing to the stocks, and they talk about buying and selling stocks, and they talk about how the stuff with Napoleon affects the stocks. And then they talk about bear markets. We've heard a little bit about that, but I didn't really look it up. Where is it? I just saw it. I just literally saw it as I was flipping through the pages. The term bear derives from the old adage to sell the bear skin before one has caught the bear. That was shortened to bearskin jobber and then simply bear around 100 years ago. It refers to someone who attacks a company by selling stock they do not own, betting that the price will drop. In other words, a rating short seller. But bears, when they start attacking a target, can absolutely destroy it. Others jump in, increasing the short selling in anticipation that the raid will continue and force the price to keep dropping, thus reaping a quick profit. Companies rarely survive a full-scale, well-executed bear raid, and in this case it has the potential to be absolutely catastrophic. The value of British consols could be caught in a downward spiral and fall into complete collapse during the short selling. A collapse of the console would render a number of the weaker banking institutions insolvent because a large amount of their assets in the form of consols, because the banks are indebted to the larger, healthier banks, their failure would threaten even those solid banking institutions, thus beginning a short domino effect of failing financial institutions. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on about stocks. I mean, she really gets into detail about stocks. After we just spent half the book learning about the telegraph system, it's like she drops it and she's like, oh, you don't need this information. Now we're going to the stock markets. Trying to lead up to the fact that the French was trying to convince British, hey, look at this, the telegraph. Pay attention to this. Don't pay attention to the stock market. Pay attention to the telegraph and the Morse code and all that kind of stuff. Pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to the stock market. You don't need to pay attention to the stock market. And I love Victoria Thompson used to do this stuff, and I love her books, and I will miss her dearly. But I love the author's note in the back of the book. Those of you who are familiar with my Rexford and Sloane mysteries know that I enjoy sharing some of the backstories on what inspired my plots and the cameo appearances of real people from the Regency era. And with this particular book, which is a little different from the previous ones, I have details to share. As someone who loves the colorful, arcane details that are often hidden within the grand tapestry of history, it's really exciting for me to fall down research rabbit holes and find myself tripping over fascinating facts that suddenly spark those wondrous creative what-if moments. And that's how the two major plot threads of this story, the electrical telegraph and the London Stock Exchange, came into being, and how Wexford and Sloane could get involved in it, and how the mysterious link to Francis Ronalds, who was in Britain, is revered as the first electrical engineer and the father of the electric telegraph. All along with a host of amazing accomplishments, most have been taught that Samuel Morse invented the electrical telegraph in 1838. So imagine my surprise when I read about Ronalds and how he constructed 8 miles of electrical wire through his mother's garden in 1816 to test the speed with which electricity could travel, and that led him to experimenting with sending electrical messages. I found Francis Ronalds and his inventions fascinating and decided it would be great fun to use it in a plot. And he does. He uses the whole thing. He uses the whole thing in the plot. So like I said, the first book, it's all the telegraph and the wires and the telegraph and sending messages and does this exist? Is it a work? And all of a sudden it just gets dropped. And then we're like, stock exchange, learning multiple details about the stock exchange. And some of the details go on for a couple pages, and you're like, all right, so who murdered this guy and what's going on and who's involved in the plot? And there's one point where Rexford and Munch are on the brink of catching a bad guy. Could they have not waited till the bad guy and the good guy, or the two bad guys, completed the transaction and then slowly snuck up on them and tried to see who they were before they made this freeze, don't move situation, and the bad guys ended up getting away? Because they should have just given that. It was just too short, and I guess that was the writer's intention, to push the plot a little further. She didn't want the book to end so early, so we got involved. We got a couple of clues to who the people involved, but we didn't know who the people were. And like I said, if they had just waited an extra couple of minutes, they might have gotten a good glimpse of the parties involved. But no, they had to wreck it and try to stop the transaction in the middle of it. And then, like I said earlier, if you're still here, massive spoiler. Spoil. I have been thinking that Charlotte may or may not come down with being with child at any some point. I thought they would be throwing that in, that she would, be with child at some point. They've been married a couple of years now, and they're living in this time period with none of that other stuff existed. And maybe that would happen. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Andrea goes, Rex's father, who's been dead a while, may or may not have married this woman. Conjecture is he did, but no one can find the documentation to it. And his father, had another child, a girl. And this lady shows up on their doorstep with this 12-year-old girl. Here, you have a sister, Rex. So now the boys have Peregrine and Raven and Hawk have EEDDY. The EDDY It's Adeline, but she likes to go by Eddie. And she is going to be adding to their adventures. She loves to work with carrier pigeons, and she loves horses like Rex does, and she puts him to shame because Rex has this horse that totally will not let anybody touch him, and this girl walks up to him, and she's all over him like a wet blanket, and he just eats it up, and everybody's sitting there going, what, how come he's so nice to her and not to me? Don't know. The whodunit of the murder kind of gets lost in all the stuff. You get a little bit of a resolution, and I always wondered why he didn't call the Bow Street Runner in at the end. You rarely see the Bow Street Runner guy, but like I said, you spend half the book with telegraph, and then you spend the next half of the book with the stock exchange, and you're like, and then in the middle of all this, Eddie shows up. Hey, Rex, you've got a sister. So now you got a girl in the house, another girl. And what you gonna do? Well, we're gonna have to wait a year to find out. That's what you get for getting a book for Christmas. Now you gotta wait for another year. I hope you all have a good day and enjoy the book. And all the stuff about the telegraph and all the stuff about a stock exchange and the poor guy. Don't even know. I'll have to go back and reread if they arrested this guy for the murder that they knew he didn't do it, but they just wanted to appease the public. And we heard that the guy wouldn't be tried or anything, but I don't know if he was ever set free. I'll have to go back and reread those parts and see what happens. But it's interesting. It's interesting. Have a good one.